Here with my campaign overview guide for Drycha of the Wood Elves. Now, if not for some of the campaign limitations that she faces, Drycha would secretly be the most powerful legendary lord of the Wood Elves. In fact, she could genuinely compete for being one of the most powerful legendary lords in the entire game. But she does have certain issues when it comes down to it. First off, her own personal combat ability just isn't really that great. She's a hybrid legendary lord, so she's got the melee skill line, the magic skill line, and the problem with that is, generally speaking, you're not going to have the points to get the full magic potential, and you always want to get the melee potential when it comes to these kind of legendary lords. Her magic can be strong, but it's not on the same level as, say, Teclis, as an example. So that's one of the issues that she does have in her campaign that does limit her potential. The other issue is that she is universally hated, and she does hate the other Wood Elven legendary lords, with the exception of Durfu. She can only confederate Durfu. She doesn't start to the Oak of Ages. She can't get Ariel. She can't get Orion. She can't get the Sisters of Twilight. That is going to impose limitations on her campaign. In particular, not starting with the Oak of Ages means she's going to have limitations on her growth, because one of the benefits that Oak of Ages, once you get it to a higher level, is that it gives you faction-wide growth. And the Wood Elves do need that growth for their economic buildings in particular, as well as a couple of other buildings that are important for their unit recruitment. However, for all those issues, Drycha still is a powerhouse. In every campaign overview guide I've done of legendary lords around her, be it Katrin or Kislev in general, Azag, Vlad, Isabella, the Empire, one of the things I've made clear again and again and again is that you don't pick a direct fight with Drycha's army at full strength unless you're bringing overwhelming force. If you're Azag, bring 2 armies, 3 armies even, with full WAs, because she can easily defeat far more significant forces than hers. But how is that? How is she so ridiculously powerful? Well, faction-wide benefits, she gets a minus 40 diplomatic relations with the Wood Elves, a minus 10% upkeep for all Dryads, for all the Tree Spirit units, a plus 10% upkeep for Elven units. She starts with 1 Ember, and all Elf units are glamored, replacing their combat power, making their combat power weaker and making them expendable. So they're going to lose some melee attack and some reload skill, but they're gaining a leadership benefit. Now, starting with that 1 Amber is a benefit because you can get things like the Wisdom of Ash, you can get things like the Wisdom of the Pine. That's probably the one you may want to start with because you do get that construction time for all buildings and that upkeep benefit for Dryads and Tree Spirits in general. Though, of course, there are some other benefits that you can get here. But my advice would probably be to go either for the Wisdom of the Pine or the Wisdom of Ash. There are some other benefits like the Wisdom of the Poplar, which gives you a growth benefit, but you can manage growth in other ways as well. Now, here's the thing that makes Drycha crazy. It's her combat potential. She doesn't have regular Tree Spirits, she has malevolent Tree Spirits. Now, the difference between regular Tree Spirits and malevolent ones is that these guys have Frenzy. Now, Tree Spirit units, the Dryads, the Treemen, the Treekin, they're incredibly powerful units. In fact, the Treekin are some of the most effective monstrous units in the entire game. The reason behind that is they have a lot of durability, physical resistance, missile resistance. They can do a lot of damage. They have a good amount of armor piercing, good armor, good leadership, and also have the ability of getting magical attacks. You throw in Frenzy on these guys, they're very difficult to kill, either by ranged units or melee units. Your best bet is to bring a lot of infantry units which have a great deal of anti-large or artillery units. Ranged units won't do so well against these guys when it comes down to it. Now, Drycha can also upgrade them faction-wide with aspects. The one I personally like the most is the aspect of the Oak. Yes, losing 10% speed can be significant. However, you're gaining 20 armor and expert charge defense, making them even more ridiculous. This is one of the reasons why you shouldn't ever face Drycha directly, unless you have overwhelming force. The way you defeat Drycha on the campaign map is you sack the Griffinwood and take the Griffinwood when her army is away. That will remove her unit recruitment, and then you hope that between your army and other armies you can bleed her to death, or you can bring overwhelming force against her army, which won't be able to recruit regular units. However, she does have another benefit beyond these malevolent Tree Spirit units. She can recruit Wild Spirits. Now, these are nowhere near as good as your regular units, but they can give her a decent amount of combat power, and she can recruit them in virtually every province. and that is pretty substantial on the face of it. Furthermore, when we're looking at Drycha, we also have to consider the fact that she has her own legendary hero, which is Coadil. Now, Coadil is probably not as good as Ariel when it comes to magical ability, though he's probably better in melee. In terms of lore effects, what she's going to get are benefits to Dryads, weapon strength, melee attack. She gets the Rouse to Wrath and minus control in an enemy province. Now, Rouse to Wrath just summons a unit of Dryads. Now, I don't particularly like Dryads all that much, though saying that they're still pretty decently armored. They have Frenzy, since they're malevolent, and you can upgrade their survivability with that 20 armor. So you can make Dryads pretty effective, and they're relatively cheap as units. Though they don't hold a candle compared to Treekin. Hell, few units hold a candle to Treekin. And that's probably one of the units you want to focus on. The thing is, she starts with 3 abilities. Rouse to Wrath, in Enfeebling Foe, which reduces melee defense and melee attack. And she also starts with the Mystifying Miasma. Her skill line, if we're looking at it, she gets a charge bonus to Tree Spirit units. The Rouse to Wrath gains increased range, and the Summoned Dryads no longer degrade. She gets significant benefits in combat, weapon strength, charge bonus, and Pageant of Shrikes, which reduces reload skill and range for enemy units. There's a theme with Drycha. She has a bunch of debuffs that she can throw on the enemy. She gets benefits to Miasma. She replaces the Glamour with Insidious Glamour, which removes the negative effects, but still keeps the leadership benefits. So she can have actually better Wood Elven units for her own army, as well as another army in her faction via the offices here, because she can get Speaker for the Lost, which also does the same thing for another Lord. So she can have pretty good Elven units in her faction, though a bit more expensive, and she doesn't have access to the Way Watchers, though it's really Glade Guards that form the bulk of the Wood Elven army. If only the AI actually did that, because the AI tends to recruit a lot of bad units when the AI is playing the Wood Elves. So when you're playing against the Wood Elves, with the exception of Durfu and Drycha, they tend to be a footnote, but they have an insane level of power. And even then, even when played by the AI, generally going against Durfu, or especially Drycha's army, is a nightmare. She causes fear and terror when ambushing a forest. She gets Befuddlement of Mischiefs, which just prevents an enemy from moving. She gets Hero Recruitment of Branch Wraiths in all provinces, increases their hero recruit rank. And on top of that, she does reduce the leadership of Elven units, buffs the leadership of Tree Spirit units, and improves their Rouse to Wrath ability. Furthermore, she has Skin of the Woods, which gives those Tree Spirit units, or rather the Treekin, 20% ward save. This is why Drycha is insane. And on top of that, she buffs the feral units, basically the monstrous units, the forest units. She can buff them significantly in her own army and give them frenzy. She is a bit insane, but it gets even worse when you're dealing with Drycha, because she has an item. Now, this is a pretty difficult quest battle, though you do certainly have the ability of getting powerful units very quickly. But you will get Coadil for this, and it gives you the Fang. Now, the Fang is one of the more annoying things when you're dealing with Drycha in a battle, and it's the combination of effects that makes Drycha so insane in a battle. She has a powerful army, she has many effects to debuff your entire army or significant portions on it. Your leadership is going to be lower because Treekin and Treemen cause fear and terror when we're talking about Treemen. And she has the ability of screwing with your casts, so increasing cooldown of your casts, of all your casters, after you've done something. So for 15 seconds, you're going to get increased cooldown. It's going to increase the cooldowns of your abilities by 15 seconds. If Drycha had the same kind of melee ability, like someone like Bellicor or Archeon, let alone someone like Malice Darkblade, she genuinely would be a top contender for one of the strongest legendary lords. And I would dare argue that while she's not really powerful herself in battle in terms of direct combat, she certainly is leading one of the most powerful armies in the entire game. Because between the Tree Spirits themselves, the various benefits she has for them faction-wide or for her own army, her ability to recruit units deep in enemy territory, she has a ridiculous level of power. That's what makes Drycha insane. Now, she starts with a tier 2 settlement. She can get Treekin in 2 turns. Enjoy dealing with that. That's one of the things that makes her insane. Though she is going to struggle because of the low growth, so my recommendation would be when you're taking these regions in the Ostermark, because you start a war with Skaven faction in Mordheim, that you can easily sweep aside. And then the Ostermark, which you can also easily sweep aside because the Empire is pretty crap, especially when it comes to the AI. Like, of all the factions in the game, the one I never fear to go up in battle when controlled by the AI is the Empire. I mean, the Wood Elves are not that great, but actually assaulting their settlements, it can be a bit tricky. The Empire is just a cakewalk. So the Ostermark is easy enough to deal with. So you take over the Ostermark, you take control of it for a while because there's certain structures that can give you a growth benefit. In the Griffinwood, you start healing the forest. Now, once you've done that, you actually have a bunch of choices because you don't have any particular faction you need to ally with. The only thing I would say is the only ally you actually want to have is Durfu, who you want to confederate. Everyone else can either be a friend or foe. You want to eliminate Orion, you want to take the Oak of Ages for yourself, absolutely. But everyone else, you can either deal with them however way you want. One of the things I would like to do in this campaign, like you can go in this campaign with two different mindsets. You can either help the side of Order, you can help the Empire, and Kislev. The way you do that, you take the Ostermark and eventually you trade it to Katrin, you take Azak's territory out, you trade that to Katrin, you take Sylvania, you keep Drakenhof for yourself because it gives you faction-wide income benefits, but you trade Northern Sylvania to the Empire or to Karakadrin, and then you have established significant alliances with the rest of the factions around you. The Empire will also like the fact that you've dealt with Vlad. Though making deals with Karl Franz can be a problem with your relations with Durfu because he doesn't particularly like the Empire. My advice is once you can teleport over here in Nephalorian, once you've stabilized your initial situation, dealt with Azag, dealt with Vlad, teleport over here, take some territory in the southern Green Mountain that's ruined, and trade that to Durfu, who's likely going to have at least one settlement here. That should allow you to build up good diplomatic relations with him. That said, if you end up being allied with Karl Franz, that's going to create complications with Durfu. So try and play that correctly. You do want to confederate Durfu. It is going to give you power. Take the Oak of Ages, start healing the forest here. I'd say make deals with Bretonnia. Or alternatively, what you can do is you can ally Azak, ally Vlad, or ally one of them, ally Grom. That would probably be the harder campaign because in the long term of things, the Empire, Bretonnia, all that may be weaker than the Greenskins and Vampires, but when I've played campaigns on Legendary very hard, it's the Empire and Bretonnia who generally come out on top. So if you're choosing to pick a fight to Bretonnia and the Empire, you're going to have more foes to deal with, though that isn't necessarily a disadvantage in your campaign. By the way, this is the kind of campaign where you could also just YOLO it and go for a This is Total War campaign, declare war on virtually everyone around you, and you can win. You need to be careful and cautious when it comes to that, of course, but it is a very doable campaign to do that with. So you can choose how you're going to deal with things. My advice, once you've taken the Oak of Ages, once you've healed the forest initially next to you, taken the Oak of Ages from Orion, made some deals with Durfu or confederated Durfu, would be to head over here in Cafe. The reason you want to head over to Cafe is if you heal the forest here, there's a particularly nice structure that, if I recall correctly, it reduces the upkeep of your tree spirit units. And that's something that you can obviously benefit when you are going to be playing with the Tree Spirit Army as Drycha. So you can go from the 10% upkeep benefit that you start with to 25% upkeep benefit to 45% upkeep benefit. It's nowhere near as good as Orion's currently, but it's still a fairly substantial upkeep benefit, provided, of course, you get the settlement over here. Now, of course, this is available for the other Wood Elf and Legendary Lords, minus the 10% upkeep benefit that Drycha does have in her own campaign. But you do have a lot of choice. You have a very powerful army. My advice when it comes to unit recruitment is get Tree Spirit units. Don't even recruit anything in the first 2 turns, because your army can beat anything that's around you. Don't even recruit anything. Maybe some of these wild spirits, like some of these dryads, giant wolves, maybe some of those, just to take these elements with ease. Out-resolve these battles, and then decide what you're going to do in this campaign. You have a lot of flexibility. That's one of the things that's nice about the Wood Elven campaigns. You actually do have a lot of flexibility about who you're going to fight, how you're going to fight them, and you can't you can't really lose a campaign if you're playing as the Wood Elves. That's just the reality of it. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.